Welcome to HCD's webinar series on the Housing Element Update. This 5-part series covers changes to state housing element law, basic requirements, and opportunities such as the Streamline Review. My name is Harrison Annixter, and I will be leading you through Part 2, covering many of the basic requirements of housing element law, including public participation, review of past programs, housing needs, and constraints. To view the remaining parts in the series, please refer to our website at www.hcd.ca.gov/HPD. This slide illustrates housing element law basics, how they interrelate, and how the entire process is framed or informed by public participation. A quick overview of housing element requirements includes evaluating past results, the review and revise section, identifying needs, including current housing conditions, special needs, and at-risk units, assessing your resources and options, which include a land inventory and an inventory of financial resources, identifying regulatory barriers and other governmental constraints, development and implementation of the plan. As you can see, all the analysis flows towards the goals, policies, and objectives. All components should reflect the public participation and community vision. The public participation section of the housing element, which is not subject to Streamline Review, presents an opportunity to engage constituents in the dialogue, defining problems and creating solutions. Housing element law requires that local government make a diligent effort to achieve the public participation of all economic segments of the community. However, every jurisdiction will be different on what constitutes a diligent effort for their community, as population sizes, demographics, and other characteristics vary widely. Public participation should be part of every stage of the update process. This includes at the time of development to assist in the preparation of the element, during revisions and adoption to coalition build and tap into the knowledge base of builders, advocates, and community leaders, among others, and during implementation. A community that is involved in the development of the element, understanding its intent, can be more supportive through implementation of the element. In general, the housing element must describe outreach efforts to the community, including outreach to low and moderate income households, stakeholders, citizens with special needs, and service providers who support them, and a general summary of feedback received and how input was applied to the housing element. There are many ideas on how to conduct the public participation process. Some ideas can be found on our housing element building block webpage. Review of the previous housing element is the foundation of your element. It creates an opportunity to examine what is appropriate in the current planning period based on what has been learned in the past. Government Code Section 65588 requires a review of the progress and effectiveness of the previous element and a review of the appropriateness for the current element. Progress in implementation. Here you are examining what was planned in past programs and what was achieved. This is where you examine the difference between what was planned and what was achieved. This is also a program-by-program review. In the effectiveness section of your review and revise section, you are describing what happened. What are the results of your goals, policies, and programs, using qualitative and quantitative information? In the appropriateness section of your review and revise section, you are analyzing what was learned and what is appropriate to incorporate in the current planning period. The housing element must include an assessment of your jurisdiction's housing needs. This assessment must include an analysis of population and employment, household characteristics, housing stock conditions, special housing needs, housing at risk of converting to market rate. This is one of the sections of the housing element that lends itself well to the new streamlined process, particularly if the overall demographics of the population haven't changed much. While you need to update the element with new numbers in the special needs categories, if the analysis and conclusions are the same as what was used in the previous element, and your element was in compliance, use it again. There is no need to reinvent the wheel. and the data packages HCD and some of the larger COGs have prepared should help you with the updated statistics. As always, if the analysis and conclusions lead to an unmet need, the element should include programs to address the issue. The identification and analysis of special needs groups includes the following: persons with disabilities, including persons with developmental disabilities, elderly, farm workers, female-headed households, homeless, and large families. The analysis should quantify the number of persons or households by tenure where possible, describe need qualitatively and quantitatively, analyze household characteristics, needed housing types, needed zoning, and existing resources, and formulate a strategy to address needs. This is the foundation for policies and implementation. It is recommended that you consult with service providers regarding housing or service waiting lists and data on income and housing costs to identify special housing needs. SB 812 is a newer piece of statute that added an additional category to the special needs group, persons with developmental disabilities. The most critical thing to think about for persons with developmental disabilities is accessibility, universal design, and affordability. Equally important is to look at the needs of families who care for children with developmental disabilities. Some housing arrangements can include shared housing, supportive housing opportunities, ground floor accessibility, and having reasonable accommodation procedures in place. The Welfare and Institutions Code, Section 4512, provides the following definition. Developmental disability means a disability that originates before an individual attains age 18, continues or can be expected to continue indefinitely, and constitutes a substantial disability for that individual. To quantify the number of individuals in your community who have developmental disabilities, you should contact your local regional center and ask them to provide the number. A list of regional centers is available on the Department of Developmental Services website at www.dds.ca.gov. The element should describe resources currently available in your community to assist the group. And, as with any special needs group, if an unmet need is identified in the element must include a program to address the need. If you need help with this, you can contact us, as we have sample analyses and sample programs that may be of assistance to you. This slide lists a variety of resources for your information to help with your housing element update. The data packages from the COG or HCD, the U.S. Census Bureau, and the California Department of Finance, the Housing Authority waiting lists, the school districts, housing service providers, builders, and realtors, religious organizations, Employment Development Department, farm worker organizations, the area agencies on aging, social service providers, including emergency shelters and independent living centers, fair housing groups, building departments, advocacy groups, the California Housing Partnership Corporation, and local area regional centers. The next section of the element we will discuss is potential governmental constraints. This is another section of the element that lends itself well to streamlining. If there haven't been any changes to the policies and procedures and the element was in compliance for the 4th cycle, this section should be good for the 5th cycle. The exception to that statement is if there was a program that was included in the 4th cycle element to mitigate a constraint and it was not implemented, HCD will still consider the issue to be a constraint that needs to be eliminated or mitigated. That being said, the element must describe and analyze land use controls, building codes and enforcement, site improvements, fees and exactions, permit and processing procedures, and housing for persons with disabilities. There are no new statutory requirements for this section of the element. To go into a bit more detail, the land use control section of your housing element identifies these aspects of land use. The analysis of these aspects needs to include the following. It should identify specific controls, determine the cumulative effect of all policies on development, demonstrate how land use controls impact costs, do the controls impede the ability to achieve maximum densities, do growth controls allow the RHNA to be achieved, do processes impact costs and supply. For codes and enforcement, describe any amendments to the state housing code. For example, what code do you use? Are there any local amendments? Describe the degree and type of enforcement. For example, is enforcement done on a complaint basis or proactively? For site improvements, describe requirements such as subdivision level requirements, that is, street widths, curbing, and landscaping. For fees and exactions, describe permit, planning, and impact fees, including land dedications and/or other exactions. You will want to itemize fees, including impact fees, for both single-family and multifamily projects, and summarize with a typical proration of fees to total development costs. Building permit processing procedures are the other area that can either incentivize or hinder the production of affordable housing. The housing element must include a description and analysis of permitting and processing procedures, including typical processing time and permit procedures, extent of discretionary review and decision-making standards, design review, plan development procedures, any inclusionary requirements. There are 4 areas which should be covered in your analysis for housing for persons with disabilities. This includes a general analysis. This should answer the following questions. What is the locality's reasonable accommodation process? Does it meet fair housing laws? Does it constrain the development, maintenance, and improvement of housing? Does the city have a definition of family? This should also include a description of zoning and land use standards. For example, parking standards, siting for group homes, concentration requirements, how are group homes over 6 persons allowed? What are the city's occupancy standards? For permits and processing, how does the process how are retrofit requests for accessibility processed? Do you allow residential care for 6 or fewer by right? Are there any particular conditions for on-site services? And finally, for building codes, what building code is used? Are there any universal design requirements or incentives? For more information on this and other housing element requirements, please visit our Building Blocks website. We are here to help. If you have any questions on the content of this webinar or about the housing element update in general, please contact us at 916-263-2911. Thank you for listening.